Why was the silence so heavy? Why did it feel like the desert itself was holding its breath? Sergeant Blade Viper pressed her body against the cold stone, her heart keeping rhythm with the distant pulse of rotating searchlights at 29. She had been called fearless, ruthless, unstoppable. But right now, she felt the weight of being human, of being breakable, of being very much alone. The night air was dry, sharp in her throat, the kind of cold that carried sound farther than it should. One cough, one misstep, one malfunctioned death would hear her coming. And still, she waited, somewhere in that fortress ahead. Behind walls of concrete and steel was the information that could tilt the balance of global power. Blueprints, codes, a network so dangerous that it wasn't just about politics or weapons. It was about erasing entire futures before they were written. She knew this. She had repeated the mission parameters in her head like a prayer, but the words never made it easier. She whispered into her mic, barely moving her lips. Ghost Leader, this is Blade. Target in sight. Beginning infiltration protocol. The voice that came back was steady, calm, detached. Just like always, copy, Blade, remember. Zero tolerance, secure the intel, no exposure, no engagement. Unless necessary. Her lips almost curved. Unless necessary. What did that mean? Really? 50 armed guards, a fortress, and a mission that was already written in blood. Engagement wasn't a possibility. It was inevitable. But she didn't argue. Orders weren't about comfort. They were about absolutes. Blade checked her gear again. Not because she had to, because she couldn't afford not to. Every strap, every clasp, every hidden blade. The Mark 7 stealth suit wrapped around her like a second skin, its faint hum reminding her of its promise. Invisibility to the enemy, to the world, even, sometimes, to herself. She hated that part. She hated how easy it was to disappear, not just from sight but from memory. What they didn't know, not Ghost Leader, not the Pentagon, not anyone, was that this wasn't just a mission. This was her penance. Her breath slowed, her body melted. Into motion, she slid along the outer wall, each step rehearsed, every angle memorized. The searchlight swept past, missing her by less than a breath. 2 guards at the fence smoked cheap cigarettes, laughing about something too soft to hear. She could have ended them both with a flick of her wrist. But tonight wasn't about indulgence. It was about necessity. She slipped by them like a shadow, unseen, unremembered. Her gloves found purchase on the cold concrete of the wall. She climbed, each movement silent, deliberate, fingers dug into grooves. Boots pressed against the surface like she had been born for this. At the top, she froze. The compound spread before her, a courtyard crawling with 20 guards in rotation. Towers that spat light into the night, windows glowing with cold blue monitors. It looked less like a building and more like a machine one that chewed men up and spat silence back into the world. Her throat tightened. She could almost hear the echoes of missions past. Brothers lost, a sister in arms who never made it back. She carried them with her, stitched into her muscles, into the ache of her bones. That was the thing about silence. It wasn't empty. It was crowded with memory, she whispered. Moving to secondary objective, no answer. Just static for a beat too long. Then Ghost Leader's voice returned, colder than before. Proceed. Her pulse didn't like that. It was a small thing barely worth noticing, but soldiers lived on the small things. Static meant interference. Interference meant someone else was listening. She pushed the thought away, burying it where doubts went when there was no room. For them, later. She'd deal with it later. She dropped into the courtyard, her boots kissing gravel without a sound. The stealth suit shimmered faintly, bending light around her, her outline dissolving into nothing. She walked through the world unseen, moving between men who would have ended her life in a heartbeat. If they only knew, and yet there it was again, that thought, that soft, traitorous whisper in the back of her mind. What if it failed? She clenched her jaw. She hated that thought most of all, because failure wasn't about dying. Failure was about what came after, about what was lost, who was lost. She reached the main entrance, fingers brushed against cold steel. Every camera, every sensor, every guard had been studied for days. She knew their movements better than they did. She was 3 breaths away from the first objective when it happened. A whine, high, sharp, electric. Sparks burst across her chest plate like fireflies. In the dark, the hum that had promised invisibility died in an instant, and suddenly she was there, visible, exposed, human. Her heart slammed against her ribs. In front of her, 2 guards. Their eyes snapped to her like magnets, rifles rising, voices caught. In their throats, halfway between shock and command. What the hell? Her mind fractured time into pieces, measuring every option. 50 guards, no backup, no cover, no suit. She could call for extraction. She could run. She could live to fight another day. But then she remembered the classroom where no one listened. The missions where she was the last one breathing. The promises made to people who would never see another sunrise. Her hand moved before thought did. A strike to the throat, precise, surgical, merciless. The first guard dropped, gasping at nothing. The second never had a chance to shout. Blade's arm wrapped around his neck, dragging him into silence. Alarms wailed. Red lights bled across concrete. The night shattered. She pressed against the wall, lungs burning, brain calculating. Failure wasn't an option, but something inside her broke open in that moment. The technology was gone, the illusion stripped. What was left was her. Her knife slid into her hand, the weight familiar, grounding. Not the high-tech weapon issued to her. Not the polished edge that required batteries and maintenance. Just steel, cold, permanent, real. And as the guards stormed toward her, rifles blazing, she understood something she hadn't admitted until now. The mission wasn't about the intel. Not really, the mission was about her. She moved. Fast, fluid, merciless. But beneath the precision, beneath the choreography of death, there was fear. Fear of being too slow. Fear of not mattering. Fear of being forgotten the moment her body hit the ground. She fought anyway, because fear was just another enemy. And like every enemy she had faced, it could be defeated. She ducked behind cover, heart pounding, breath ragged, bullets carved. The air, chewing the concrete inches from her skull. She thought of the voice in her ear, the static, the cold detachment. Something wasn't right. Something about this mission was wrong, but there was no time. Answers had to wait. Survival came first. Her blade kissed ribs, slipped between vertebrae, pressed against arteries. Men fell quietly. Their lives snuffed out faster than they realized they were in danger. Every strike was efficient. Every move rehearsed, but inside she was bleeding in ways no knife could heal. For every man she cut down, another face flashed in her memory. A brother she'd lost, a commander who never came back. A promise she had whispered to herself in the dark. If I survive, it has to mean something. And maybe that was why she didn't stop. Why she didn't hesitate. Why, when the odds pressed down like a mountain, she stood anyway. Because to Blade, Viper, survival wasn't about breathing. It was about proving that even when everything failed, when technology, backup, and trust dissolved into smoke, a single human will could still stand. The alarms grew louder. Footsteps thundered through the halls. Voices barked orders in a language thick with rage. She tightened her grip on the blade, eyes flicking toward the upper floors. The intel was still there. The mission was still alive, and so was she, for now. But somewhere, hidden in the static, buried beneath the chaos, was a truth she hadn't uncovered yet. A truth that would make her question not only the mission, but everything she believed about the people who sent her here. She just didn't know it yet. How long could a single heartbeat last? Blade felt like hers had stretched into eternity, echoing in her ears louder than the alarms, louder than the chaos. Every second mattered now, every sound, every shadow. And yet, even as her body surged into motion, part of her lingered in that impossible thought. How long could a life be measured if it ended here? The courtyard was no longer silent. Boots hammered against gravel. Orders were shouted into radios, clipped syllables bouncing off the walls. Her stealth had evaporated, her invisibility shattered. She was no longer a phantom. She was prey in the open, and yet she moved like a predator. Her blade sank into one guard before his rifle cleared his chest. Another went down with a muffled gasp, his radio spilling static into the night. She didn't stay to watch. She didn't need to. The next moment was already rushing at her. She slid behind a concrete barrier as gunfire ripped the air apart. Chips of stone sprayed across her face, dust filling her lungs. For a heartbeat, she allowed herself to feel the raw panic rising in her throat. This was it, the moment operatives feared most. Equipment failure, outnumbered, exposed, alone, but she had trained for this. Her mind replayed the hours, the days, the years spent in silence, stripped of technology, stripped of weapons, stripped even of her name, until only instinct remained. And instinct whispered to her now, a voice more trustworthy than ghost leaders, more honest than any command. Move, strike, breathe, survive. She vaulted over the barrier. Guards reacted too slow, expecting her pinned. Her knife flashed. Silent, merciless, 1, 2, 3. Each motion carved from memory, each strike exact. They fell as if gravity itself had chosen them, but she couldn't ignore what she saw in their eyes. Fear, not of death. Soldiers made peace with that long ago. It was fear of her. As if she weren't flesh and blood, but something less human. Something that had stepped out of their nightmares. The way they hesitated, the way their hands shook even as their rifles rose, she had seen it before. And she had hated it then, too. Because she wasn't a ghost. She wasn't a legend. She wasn't death. She was just Blade, and Blade was tired. Still, she pressed forward, lungs burning, muscles screaming. She darted through corridors, weaving between gunfire, her body carrying her before her thoughts caught up. The compound was alive now. Lights flared on. Sirens wailed. Doors slammed shut in sequence as security protocols locked into place. Every hallway was a trap, every corner a promise of violence. And yet, her movements were calm, controlled. Not because she wasn't afraid, but because fear sharpened her. She pressed her back against the wall, chest heaving. The pounding of boots grew louder again. A squad approaching fast. She had seconds, maybe less. Her eyes flicked upward. Ventilation duct. She leapt, fingers catching the edge. Body folding like liquid into the shaft. Metal groaned softly beneath her weight as she crawled into the dark. Below, the squad swept past. Flashlights cut across the floor, weapons ready. She can't be far. She's just one. We'll pin her. Their voices bled arrogance, confidence born of numbers. But beneath it, she heard the tremor. They wanted to believe what they were saying. They needed to believe, because the alternative was unbearable, that a single operative could unravel them all. Blade closed her eyes. She wanted to believe too. She wanted to believe this was just another mission, that the world outside this fortress hadn't already decided she was expendable, that the static in her comms wasn't hiding something darker, that there was something she hadn't told anyone. Not Ghost Leader, not Command, not even herself, not out loud. The suit's failure hadn't surprised her. Not completely. A shiver worked its way down her spine. She pressed her forehead against the cold duct metal, letting the thought slip away. Later, she'd face it later. If later existed, the shaft ended above a junction of hallways. She peered through the grate. Guards clustered below 6 of them, sweeping the halls in pairs. A perfect rotation, tight formation, the kind you learned only after years of training. And yet, she spotted it. A gap. A single blind spot they didn't know they had. Her pulse slowed. She moved, The grate fell silently, her body following in its shadow. She landed among them like smoke. The first guard never even turned. The seconds. Gasp ended beneath her hand. The others broke formation, their discipline crumbling as fear sliced deeper than her blade ever could. Gunfire erupted wild, panicked. Bullets chewed walls, shattered glass, tore shadows apart. Not one touched her. By the time silence returned, 5 bodies lay on the floor. 1 guard remained, hands trembling so violently his rifle clattered from his grip. She stared at him. Just a boy. 19 maybe, his eyes wide with terror, his breath ragged. He wasn't ready to die, and she wasn't. Ready to kill him, her knife hovered in the air. For the first time tonight, her hand shook. She whispered, more to herself than to him, "You don't belong here." His lips parted, no words coming out, just breath, shallow, afraid. She stepped back for a moment. Humanity pierced the mission's armor. She wasn't here to kill boys. She wasn't here to be death incarnate. She was here for the intel, for something greater, for survival that meant more than blood. Run, she told him. He didn't wait. Boots slammed against the floor as he disappeared into the chaos. Her chest ached as if she'd been struck. She knew she'd broken protocol. 0 tolerance, no survivors. But she also knew something else. The boy wouldn't fire another shot. Tonight, sometimes mercy was its own weapon. She pressed forward, weaving through the compound's arteries, every step closer to the objective, every breath heavier with the knowledge of what she had just done. She told herself it was humanity, compassion, a deep down. Another voice whispered, weakness, sir. Kung crackled again. Blade. Status. She froze. Ghost Leader's voice was steady. Too steady. Engaged. She whispered back. Casualties? Her throat tightened. Did they mean hers or the enemy's? She couldn't tell anymore. Significant. A pause. The kind that wasn't about static. The kind that measured trust. Proceed. The line went dead. Her gut twisted. Every instinct screamed that something was off. She had felt it since. The moment the suit failed, since the moment she became visible, she wanted to believe in her command. And the people who had trained her, armed her, sent her here. She wanted to believe this was just another mission. But deep down she feared the truth. That maybe she wasn't just fighting the enemy. Maybe she was fighting the people who sent her. Here too, the alarms howled louder. The compound was awake. Every corridor a trap. Blade tightened her grip on the knife, her hand steady again. Weakness would not define her. Mercy would not undo her. But the doubt had lingered, gnawing, whispering. With every step, and though she didn't know it yet, that doubt was the most dangerous weapon in the building. Why did the footsteps sound like thunder? Blade crouched in the dark, her back pressed against a wall that felt too thin, too fragile to keep her safe. The alarms hadn't stopped. The red light still bled through the compound, painting every surface with a reminder. She was exposed. She was hunted. And yet, it wasn't the alarms or the lights that unsettled her most. It was the silence between them. She could hear it, the deliberate rhythm of boots moving in unison, not the panicked scrambling of guards anymore, not the messy, frantic search of men out of their depth. This was different, measured, disciplined. The sound of soldiers who knew what they were doing. Rapid response teams. Her pulse slowed, not from calm but from inevitability. She had studied them during recon, the compound's best, trained for exactly this kind of breach. They moved in units of 6, coordinated, methodical, efficient. Against anyone else, they would have been overwhelming. Against her. Her hand tightened on her knife. She whispered to herself, "They don't know what's coming." The first team appeared at the end of the corridor. Flashlights cut across the walls, rifles raised. She stayed still, unmoving, part of the shadows. Themselves, they swept closer. 6 of them. Helmets, body armor, every corner covered. Then timing. A breath held, a muscle tensed, a decision made. She dropped from above, from the ceiling tiles she had loosened minutes earlier. The first man never knew she was there. Her blade pierced through his collar, and before his body hit the floor, she was already moving. The second spun, weapon rising, too slow. Her elbow drove into his jaw. Snapping bone, she flowed to the third, cutting his radio cord before the shout formed on his lips. 6 seconds. 4 men down. The others hesitated. That single hesitation was everything. She disappeared into the corridor's blind spot, vanishing between their beams of light. They turned too late. By the time they fired, they were shooting at phantoms. Her knife whispered again, and silence followed. When the last body hit the floor, Blade crouched among them. Her breath came hard, ragged, but her eyes stayed sharp. She didn't revel in it. There was no satisfaction, just the weight of necessity. Another handful of lives erased because someone decided they had to be. Her fingers brushed the hilt of her knife, slick. With warmth, she closed her eyes. For a moment, just a moment, she let herself feel it. The heaviness, the endless cost of this life. But she didn't have the luxury to stay there. The compound was alive. More would come. Always more. She dragged the bodies out of sight, tucking them into shadow. It wouldn't stop the discovery, but maybe it would delay it. Delay was survival. Her cum crackled again. Ghost Leader's voice filled her ear. Too calm, too steady. Status, Blade. She hesitated. Something inside her clenched. They should have been more urgent. They should have sounded worried. First contact, she said, her voice low, even. Team neutralized. A pause. The kind of pause you didn't measure in seconds, but in suspicion. Then, proceed. The line went dead again. Her throat tightened. Proceed. Just that. No acknowledgement. No concern. No urgency. As if this wasn't a mission, but a test. The thought lodged itself in her mind, jagged and unshakable. Was that what this was? Was that why the suit had failed? Was she here not for intel, but to prove something to someone sitting in a safe room miles away? She shook her head, pushing the thought down. Survival first. Doubt later, if later came, but her chest still ached as she moved deeper into the compound. The second team came faster. She heard them before she saw them. Boots pounding, weapons ready, voices sharp. They weren't searching anymore. They were hunting. She slipped into the ventilation shaft again, her body twisting in silence above their heads. They passed beneath her 6 men in formation, rifle sweeping. She waited until they were centered. Then she dropped. This time, she didn't use the knife first. She used fear. Her landing was silent, but deliberate, enough for them to feel her presence before they saw her. One man shouted. Another spun. The formation broke. That was all it took. Her knife cut through the space between them, a shoulder severed, a throat opened. Blood misted the air as panic shattered discipline. They fired wildly, rounds sparking off walls, bullets tearing into their own men. She moved with surgical precision, each strike faster than their panic could register. Within seconds, the hallway was still again. Bodies sprawled, the air thick with smoke and fear. And fear it lingered, not hers, theirs. She heard it on their radios before she destroyed them. She's not human. She moves like a ghost. She's death itself. Blade froze when she heard it. The words pressed into her chest like knives, sharper than the one in her hand. She didn't want to be their monster. She didn't want to be death. She wanted to be human. But humanity didn't win missions. Humanity didn't survive. She clenched her jaw. If fear was their weapon against her, she would turn it against them instead. Fear could paralyze. Fear could break formations. Fear could win battles before they began. And yet, deep inside, the cost whispered back at her. If she let them believe she was more than human, how long before she forgot she wasn't? Her boots carried her forward down another hall, deeper into the compound's veins. Every step was heavier now, not from exhaustion, though her body ached, but from the questions rising in her chest. What if Ghost Leader already knew her suit would fail? What if the mission wasn't about intel at all? What if the enemy wasn't just out here in the dark, but back home, behind a desk, watching her like a lab rat? She clenched her teeth. Rage tried to rise, but she forced it down. Rage didn't. Server, focus did. Still, the seed of betrayal had been planted. The third team arrived while she was cutting power in a junction. The hallway lights blinked out, plunging everything into darkness. The men cursed, fumbling with night vision. Goggles, but darkness wasn't her weakness. It was her ally. She had trained blind, fought blind, learned to feel the air shift around her, to hear the muscles tighten before a strike, to move where instinct told her, not where eyes guided her. She struck in silence. The first man screamed before his voice. Choked off, his panic infected the others. Gunfire flared, but they were shooting ghosts. She moved through them like wind through wheat, fast, silent, precise. By the time the emergency lights hummed back on, the hallway was painted with their failure. She was already gone above, in the compound's command center. Major Volkov watched in disbelief. His men veterans, trained killers, were unraveling, one operative dismantling them piece by piece. He demanded numbers. His lieutenant stammered, 3 teams down, sir. 18 men. She's, his voice cracked. She's tearing them apart. Blade didn't hear those words. She didn't need to. She saw it in the men she fought, saw the terror in their eyes, heard the doubt in their voices. And she felt something else too. Not pride, not triumph, but sorrow. Because with every life she ended, she knew she was losing something too. Piece by piece, shadow by shadow, she wasn't just killing them. She was killing the part of herself that still believed she was different from what they called her. Not a ghost, not death, just Blade. But the line between them was fading, and deep down, she feared what would remain when the mission was over. Why did the air suddenly taste like metal? Blade crouched at the junction of 2 corridors, chest heaving, sweat stinging her eyes. For a moment, she thought it was blood. The tang on her tongue, sharp, bitter. But then the hiss reached her. Here's a sound too soft, too steady to be gunfire or alarms. A sound that didn't belong, gas. Her body tensed. Her mind locked onto the truth before her instincts could argue. They weren't just sending more men. They were sealing the exits. Deploying chemical weapons, choosing annihilation over surrender. Her throat constricted, though the fumes hadn't reached her yet. Just the thought of it, the realization that someone, somewhere, had ordered this, it stole the breath from her lungs. Not fear, fury. She pressed a hand to the wall, grounding herself. Ghost Leader, she whispered into her mic. Confirm. They're deploying gas. Static answered. Then, calm. Too calm. Copy. Abort. Extraction protocol? Abort. After everything? After 20, maybe 30 lives ended beneath her hands, after alarms and sirens and blood? Abort now? Her voice came out sharper than she intended. Negative. Intel not secured. Target room is ahead. Another pause. The kind of pause that stretched seconds into questions, then Blade. Extraction now. She ripped the cum from her throat, slammed it against the wall until sparks hissed. The silence that followed felt cleaner. No more voices, no more calm orders, no more masks. If she was going to survive this, if she was going to finish what she started, it would be her choice, not theirs. She moved, fast, silent, determined. The hiss grew louder as she advanced, spreading through ventilation, curling into corners. She could smell it now, acrid, poison threaded with chemical certainty. It burned her eyes, scratched her throat, pressed invisible fingers around her lungs. Her knife was steady in her hand. Her legs carried her forward, but her mind was drifting to places she hated. Faces not the enemies, hers. The faces of those who never came back. The sister-in-arms who laughed in the mess hall one night and lay broken the next. The mentor whose words still echoed in her mind. When everything fails, the mission is you, she. Wondered if they'd see her now, fighting through poison and betrayal, and think she was living up to that. Or if they'd see the cracks, the doubt, the humanity she couldn't kill no matter how hard she tried. A squad appeared ahead. Gas masks fitted, rifles raised. Their lenses glowed in the emergency light, cold, inhuman. She froze for only a breath. Then she surged forward. They expected a target pinned by fear. What they found was a storm. Her blade struck the first before his weapon fired. She rolled beneath the second's rifle, slicing straps, tearing his mask away. He gasped reflexively, sucking poison deep into his lungs before her knife ended the breath altogether. The third fired. Too close, too wild. The bullet grazed her arm, heat blooming across her skin. She didn't cry out. She didn't stop. Pain was noise, and she had learned long ago how to cut noise into silence. When the last guard fell, she was panting, chest heaving. Her lungs burned. The hiss was louder now. The air itself felt heavier, like breathing smoke. And yet her feet carried her forward because there was no choice. The server room loomed ahead, steel doors reinforced, guarded by the last wall between her and the objective. She could already hear the voices of the elite units stationed there, calm, ready. They weren't panicked like the others. They were waiting. Her vision swam for a moment. She pressed her forehead to the wall, grounding herself, forcing the gas. Back with sheer will, she closed her eyes, whispered to herself, "You're not dead yet." She studied the door, cameras, sensors, guns trained on every possible approach. She counted them. 8. 8 men between her and the mission. 8 men who had trained their whole lives to stop someone like her. She almost laughed, because tonight, even without the suit, even without the lies, she was still Blade Viper. She dropped into the vents again, sliding above them. The steel pressed against her palms, slick with sweat. Her chest burned with every breath, lungs screaming for clean air. She ignored it, focused on the rhythm below. The guards shifting weight, breathing steady, weapons ready. She timed it, counted, waited until the quiet grew long enough to cut. Then she dropped. Her body hit the floor in their midst like a hammer on glass. The first man fell before the shock left his eyes. The second raised his weapon, but she twisted it into the third, their bullets chewing into each other instead of her. The room erupted. In violence, shouts, gunfire, the acrid bite of powder mixing with poison. She moved like water through them, her knife a whisper of inevitability. The fourth fell with a crushed windpipe. The fifth convulsed after steel found his spine. The sixth hesitated. Just a heartbeat. Just long enough to lose everything. By the time the seventh realized his squad was gone, she was already behind him. The knife pressed to his artery, a whisper at his ear. Wrong night to believe in orders. He dropped. The last one faced her, weapon trembling. For a moment, she saw not an enemy but another human being staring at death. She almost gave him the same mercy she had given the boy earlier. Almost, but the hiss in her lungs reminded her. Mercy had limits, and the gas had no mercy at all. Her blade found him, then silence, just her ragged breath, just a racing pulse. The server room door stood unguarded now, a final barrier between her and the truth. She forced it open, staggered inside. Cold air greeted her, sterile, filtered, cleaner than the halls drowning in poison. She collapsed against the terminal, chest heaving, knife still slick in her hand. Her reflection stared back at her in the monitor, pale, blood-streaked, eyes burning with something she didn't want to name. She wanted to cry, but instead, she forced her hands to move. Keys clicked beneath her fingers as she began the data extraction. Her breath came in shallow gasps, lungs clawing for every pocket of clean air. Outside, boots thundered again. Voices shouted, reinforcements. She didn't care. The bar on the screen crawled forward. 10%, 20, 30. Each second stretched like years. Her throat mic was gone, destroyed against the wall. But if she had one thing to say, if she could speak to them now, it would have been this. You left me here, and I'm still finishing it. The footsteps grew closer, the hiss of gas pressed against the sealed door. Her blade rested in her palm, waiting, and in that moment, Blade Viper understood something. She had always known but never said. This mission was never about trust. It was about what remained when trust was gone. Why did the progress bar move so slowly? Blade's eyes burned from the gas. Her chest heaved against the weight pressing down on her lungs. And still she couldn't look away from the flickering monitor. 37%, 38, 40. The cursor blinked at her like it was mocking her. Every second stretched into eternity. Her blade rested in her hand, slick with the sweat that no filtered air could take away. She sat between two worlds, one of cold logic, of files and data and glowing code, the other of blood, shadows, and the echo of boots pounding closer. Her body screamed for her to stop. Her training demanded she push forward. Her heart told her that even if she got the data, none of this would matter if she didn't make it out alive. But still her hands moved, steady on the keys, pulling the secrets from the fortress that had already claimed too many lives. The door shuddered, a metallic groan. Reinforcements. Her body tensed. She counted the seconds between strikes on the door. 1, 2, 3. A rhythm that meant ramming equipment. They weren't kicking anymore. They were breaking through. The bar inched forward. 52%. 54. 56. Her vision blurred. Her breath grew shallow. The hiss of the gas outside seeped into her skull like a whisper. You're out of time. She rose to her feet, knife steady, eyes locked on the door. The steel buckled, groaned again. A sliver of light cut across the floor. Then the breach came. 8 men stormed in, gas masks tight, rifles raised. They expected desperation. They expected a woman cornered, choking on fear. They found something else. Blade didn't retreat. She surged forward, turning the server racks into cover. Bullets shredded machines, sparks flying like fireworks across the dark. She used the chaos like smoke, moved between it, around it, through it. Her knife struck first blood. A guard convulsed as she cut the air from his throat. She dragged his falling body into the path of incoming fire. Bullets tore through him. Sparing her, she threw the corpse aside, lunged at the second. Steel found artery. Silence followed. The room erupted in thunder, gunfire, shouts, the grinding hum of machines dying around them. The progress bar climbed. 68%, 72. She was everywhere, crawling beneath racks, vanishing behind pillars, her body blending with the chaos. The men fired, but every bullet found machines instead of her. Every round wasted tightened their fear, their urgency. One dropped his rifle, switching to a sidearm in panic. Too slow. She was already there, her knife carving silence into him. Another turned, only to catch her elbow across his mask. His goggles cracked, gas rushing inside. His scream ended in a cough that never finished. 4. Down. 4 to go. Her lungs burned, not just from the gas creeping in, but from the weight of it all. Each man she struck down made her stronger in the fight, but weaker inside. The doubt gnawed at her. Was she proving herself or losing herself? The progress bar climbed. 80%, 82. A guard clipped her shoulder with a round. Heat seared through muscle, tearing fabric. Her knife fell for a heartbeat before she caught it again. Fingers slick. Pain thundered through her body. But she forced it aside. Pain wasn't the enemy. Hesitation was. She struck back harder, sharper. A storm condensed into human form. One man's neck broke against the steel corner of a server rack. Another crumpled when she dragged him into his comrade's fire. Only 2 remained. They backed toward the doorway. Discipline fracturing, weapons trembling, their radios spilled. Frantic words. She's still standing. She's still. Before silence swallowed them. Blade's knife ended the second to last with precision. The final man fired wildly, emptying his clip, bullet shredding machines, destroying the very data he was trying to protect. He didn't notice her until she was inches away, until her eyes, burning with exhaustion and fury, met his. And then he didn't notice anything at all. The progress bar blinked 98%, 99 complete. The word flashed across the screen like a salvation she didn't trust. She ripped the drive from the terminal, shoved it into her vest, and staggered back. The server racks around her sparked, smoking riddled with bullet holes. The clean, cold air was gone. Gas hissed through the cracks, seeping into her lungs again, and then the voice, it wasn't in her ear anymore. It was in the building itself. The PA system crackled, distorted but clear enough to slice through the chaos. Self-destruct sequence initiated. 90 seconds to detonation. Her stomach dropped. They weren't just willing to gas their own men. They were going to bury the entire compound, destroy everything, the intel, the soldiers, even themselves, just to keep her from leaving with what she'd taken. She pressed her back to the wall, chest heaving, knife still slick in her hand. 90 seconds, 90 heartbeats, 90 chances to die. Her eyes swept the room, searching for exits. The door was a death trap, crawling with more boots on the other side. The vents? Already filling with poison, windows? Reinforced, her gaze fell on the floor hatch. Maintenance shaft. She had seen it on recon, marked it as a last resort. Now it was the only resort. She ripped it open, the air rushing up like the exhale of a dying building. Darkness yawned below. She dropped in without hesitation. The shaft was narrow, choking, the smell of chemicals seeping into her pores. Her shoulders screamed where the bullet had torn flesh. Her lungs clawed for oxygen that wasn't there. Her vision blurred. 60 seconds, she crawled, twisted, pulled herself forward. The metal groaned beneath her weight. Sparks flickered above as the building began tearing itself apart. She reached the junction, veered left, remembering the map she'd memorized days ago. The shaft sloped downward toward the waste processing center, toward the perimeter, toward survival. 30 seconds. The shaft collapsed ahead, debris sealing the path. Concrete and steel twisted, choking the exit. She slammed her fist against it, chest heaving, rage pressing against her throat. No way out. Her hand reached into her pack, pulled free the last of her charges. She planted them against the wall, fingers trembling. Pressed the trigger. Boom. The explosion tore the shaft apart. Concrete dust choking her, metal ripping open. A hole gaped to the outside world. Smoke, stars. Cold air rushing in. 15 seconds. She crawled through, dragging herself into the courtyard. Her lungs burned. Her legs barely carried her, but her body obeyed, because it had to. 10 seconds. The perimeter wall loomed ahead, dark and jagged. She sprinted, or what passed for sprinting, with lungs shredded and muscles failing, and then she wasn't alone. A figure emerged from the smoke, running, carrying a case, his uniform torn, his face streaked with dust. Major Volkov, the commander, fleeing with his own copy of the data. Her heart seized. If he escaped, everything she'd fought for would collapse. Every drop of blood, every breath stolen from her lungs. It would all be meaningless. 5 seconds. She didn't think. She didn't weigh options. She just ran. Her body collided with his. They slammed into the dirt. The case tumbling away. His fist lashed out, desperate. Hers were sharper, fueled by more than survival. Fueled by the truth. This was never just about data. It was about the choice to finish. 1 second. She ripped the drives from his hand. The world erupted. The compound exploded behind them. A roar that tore the night apart. The shockwave slammed into her body, lifting her, hurling her against the wall. Stone cracked. Darkness swallowed her, and for a moment there was nothing. No sound, no breath, no mission. Just silence, the kind of silence that could mean death or rebirth. Why did the silence feel heavier now than the gunfire? Blade woke to it, not alarms, not shouting, not the roar of a fortress collapsing into itself. Just silence. And the steady beep of a monitor she didn't trust. Her eyes flickered open. Ceiling white to white, fluorescent light humming above her like a fly trapped in glass. She turned her head. Machines, tubes, and Ford dripping into her arm. Her body ached everywhere. Muscles torn, lungs scorched, shoulder wrapped in gauze stiff. With blood, she tried to move, but her body protested with fire. For a moment, panic surged. Was she in enemy hands? Captured? Then the flag caught her eye, a corner of it, stitched on the uniform of the man posted at the door. Her flag, her country, safe. But not really. The thought hit her as sharp as the pain in her chest. Safety was never free. Safety had strings. The guard noticed her stir. He tapped his earpiece. She's awake. Moments later, the door opened. Ghost Leader walked in. Clean uniform, calm eyes, a face untouched by the chaos she had lived through. Blade stared at him, throat dry. Words stuck to her ribs like broken glass. When they came, they weren't a greeting. They were an accusation. You left me there. Ghost Leader didn't flinch, didn't deny it. He just pulled a chair close. Son leaned forward with hands folded. His voice was steady, too steady. You completed the mission. Blade's laugh cracked, bitter. It hurt her ribs, but she didn't stop. That's what you call it. 50 men dead, gas choking the halls, a building collapsing on top of me. That's what you call complete? He tilted his head, measured, detached. You got the data. That's what matters. Her jaw clenched. She wanted to throw the force stand at him. Wanted to cut the calm from his face with the knife she no longer had. But she stayed still, because rage was a weapon, and weapons were never wasted. You knew, she whispered. His eyes flicked, just for a moment. Enough. You knew the suit would fail. Silence. Not denial, not surprise. Just the kind of silence that confirmed what her gut had screamed that night. Ghost Leader leaned back. We needed to know. Her fists tightened against the sheets. Know what? That you could survive without it. The words hit harder than any bullet. She stared at him, her chest rising and falling, the monitor beeping faster in sync with her fury. You sabotaged me, she said. Not a question, a statement, his. Gaze stayed locked. We tested you. Her body shook. Pain radiated from her wounds. But none of it hurt like the truth did. All of it. The panic, the fire, the suffocation, the blood. It hadn't been just the enemy. It had been them. Her own command. 50 men died because of your test. They were enemy combatants, Ghost Leader replied. Flat, her voice cracked, breaking through the control she had tried to hold. And what about me? What about what it cost me? He leaned forward again, lowering his voice as if to make the cruelty more intimate. You proved something. You showed us that a soldier doesn't need the technology. That when everything fails, human instinct and training still win. That's worth more than your pain. Her throat closed. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Not from gas, not from injury, from betrayal. Did you ever plan to pull me out? She asked. He paused, just long enough to confirm the answer. If you'd failed, the mission was already lost. She turned her head, staring at the wall so she wouldn't have to see his face. She wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. She wanted to believe she was still human enough to do both. But all that came out was a whisper. I wasn't your soldier. I was your experiment. Silence again. Heavy. He didn't deny it. He didn't comfort her. He didn't even pretend. Instead, he stood, adjusted his jacket, and walked to the door. Before leaving, he said the words that would echo in her chest long after the room was empty. You survived. That's all that matters. The door closed, and for the first time since the mission began, Blade felt truly alone. Her body trembled, her chest burned. Her mind replayed the mission. Every strike, every life ended, every scream swallowed by silence. She had thought she was fighting for her country, for the people who gave her orders. But now she saw the truth. She had been fighting for herself, and the cost was more than she had realized. She closed her eyes. The monitor beeped steady. Indifferent memories surged. The young guard she had spared, running down the hall. The final moment in the courtyard. Volkov's face as she ripped the drives from his hands. The explosion swallowing everything behind her. She wondered if they would haunt her, or if they would harden her, and beneath it all, one truth gnawed at her ribs like a beast refusing to let go. She had survived, but survival didn't feel like victory. It felt like a debt she wasn't sure she could ever repay. Why did their eyes remind her of ghosts? Blade stood at the front of the classroom, the weight of the past weeks pressing harder than her body armor ever had. Rows of recruits sat before her, straight-backed, eyes sharp, faces still untouched by the kind of shadow she carried. They looked at her with expectation, with awe, with a belief she no longer held in herself. The mission had already become legend. The reports spread faster than truth ever could. 50 guards neutralized. A fortress gutted from the inside. An operative who completed the impossible despite catastrophic equipment failure. They called it victory. She called it survival. But here she was, standing in the light of a projector, asked to speak, asked to teach, asked to take the nightmare that nearly consumed her and turn it into a manual for them to follow. She let the silence hang for a moment, let them feel the weight of it. Then she asked, her voice low, steady, "Do you know what happens when your equipment fails?" A ripple moved through them. Some shifted, some smirked nervously. None answered. Blade's eyes narrowed. When the technology you've been trained to trust goes dark. When your invisibility collapses. When the air itself turns against you, what do you have left? She paced slowly across the front of the room, her limp still noticeable. The scar on her shoulder a fresh line of fire. You have your training, your instincts, and your will to survive. The room was silent. She could hear her own words echoing back at her, like they were meant less for them and more for herself. She thought of the young guard she had spared. His eyes, his terror. She thought of Volkov clutching the drives, his desperation. She thought of Ghost Leader's calm voice saying, "You survived. That's all that matters." And she wondered if any of them could understand the cost. "You think your weapons make you strong," she said, her tone sharper now. "You think the suit, the rifle, the gadgets they issue you will carry you. But the truth is this. Every piece of equipment you hold is temporary, fragile. It will fail. It will betray you." Her hands curled into fists, her voice softened, almost breaking. "But the knowledge in your mind, the strength in your body, the resolve in your heart, that's permanent." She saw it then, a shift in their eyes. Not just awe now, not just belief, something harder, respect, maybe even fear. One recruit raised his hand, young, eager. "Instructor Viper, how do we get that level of resolve?" The question cut through her chest. How do you teach someone to survive betrayal? To live with ghosts? To kill with one hand and carry guilt with the other? She let the silence stretch. Then she answered, each word heavy with truth. "You train like your life depends on it, because one day it will." The room didn't move. No one coughed. No one shifted. They sat frozen, as if afraid the weight of her words might crush them if they broke the moment. Blade exhaled slowly. She had given them what they came for. The doctrine command. Wanted her to pass down. The new creed they were already whispering about in classified halls. The Viper Protocol. But as she looked at them, at their eager faces, she felt the hollowness in her chest widen. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know that the legend they'd been fed was born from sabotage, that her trial by fire had been lit not by enemies, but by her own command. that every lesson they'd now learned came at the cost of her trust, her faith, her soul. She looked down at her hand. Even here, weeks later, it trembled sometimes, as if the knife were still slick, as if the weight of 50 men clung to her skin. She clenched it until the tremor stopped. Later, alone in her quarters, she stared at the commendations pinned to her wall. Medals, certificates, a letter of recognition signed by hands that had never touched blood. She hated them. She hated how clean they looked, how meaningless they felt. Her eyes drifted to the corner of the desk. A note, handwritten, from one of the recruits. It said, "My equipment failed last night, but your training didn't. Mission accomplished." She held it for a long time. Longer than she expected. The paper shook in her hand. That was the paradox, wasn't it? She hated what they had done to her. Hated the betrayal. Hated the lies. But if her survival could keep someone else alive, if her suffering could turn into strength for another, then maybe it wasn't meaningless after all. She sat on the edge of her bed, the note in her hand, and let herself breathe, really breathe. Not the shallow gasps of survival, not the forced steadiness of training. Just one breath, human, imperfect. And in that breath, she found something she hadn't felt since the mission. Hope. It wasn't clean. It wasn't bright. It was scarred, fractured, fragile, but it was there. Maybe that was the lesson the recruits couldn't see yet. The one command would never write into a manual. That strength wasn't about killing 50 men. It wasn't about finishing missions when everything failed. It was about finding something worth living for when you wanted nothing more than to stop. She leaned back, closing her eyes, the note still in her hand, and for the first time since Crimson Dawn, Blade Viper let herself believe, just for a heartbeat, that survival could mean more than just being alive. Why did survival feel so heavy? Blade sat in the dim light of her quarters, long after the recruits had left, long after the halls of the training facility had gone quiet. The medals on the wall didn't shine in the darkness. They looked dull, hollow, just like the stories that had been written about her. In the silence, she thought of the compound. She thought of the gas hissing through the halls, the blade sinking into flesh, the moment she had spared the boy who couldn't have been more than 19. She thought of Volkov, clutching the drives, his eyes wide as the explosion ripped the world apart behind them. And she thought of the voice that still echoed in her chest. You survived. That's all that matters. Her hand trembled as she lifted the note again. The one from the recruit. My equipment failed last night, but your training didn't. Mission accomplished. She had read it 100 times, 1,000, every time it cut and healed at once. Proof that her pain had purpose. Proof that maybe, just maybe, there was something greater than betrayal. But it didn't silence the ghosts. When she closed her eyes, they came. The faces of men who died beneath her hands. The eyes of the young guard she had spared. The look in his face when mercy spared his breath. Did he remember her? Did he still see her in the dark, the way she saw him? She wondered if sparing him had been weakness or strength. She wondered if mercy could ever be clean in a world that demanded silence, demanded blood. The truth was simple and terrible. She didn't know. Weeks became months. The Viper protocol spread like wildfire. Every branch, every unit, every recruit drilled the lessons carved from her suffering. She saw them trained blindfolded, starved, stripped of tech, pushed to the edge of breaking. She heard instructors whisper her name like a warning, like a myth. Blade Viper, the one who survived the impossible. But the myth was cleaner than the truth. The myth didn't include betrayal. The myth didn't include doubt. The myth didn't include the way her body still shook when the lights flickered, the way her lungs still tightened when she smelled smoke. The myth didn't bleed. She did. One evening, she stood at the edge of the training yard, watching recruits crawl through the dirt. Blind, guided only by instinct, they stumbled, they cursed, they failed. But some of them got back up. Some of them pushed forward anyway. She realized then, maybe that was the point. Not victory, not glory, just getting back up when everything fell apart. A voice broke her thoughts. Instructor Viper? She turned. A recruit stood there, young, nervous. His eyes carried the same mixture of fear and respect she had seen so many times before. Yes? He hesitated then. Do you ever regret it? What you had to do? The question pierced deeper than any blade. She looked at him and his trembling hands. At the innocence that hadn't yet been burned out of him, her throat tightened. She wanted to lie. She wanted to tell him no. That regret was weakness. That missions required absolutes, but she couldn't. Yes, she whispered. Every day. The recruit's eyes widened, not in judgment, in understanding. But, she continued, her voice steadier now, regret doesn't mean failure. It means you're still human, and staying human. That's the hardest part of this job. He nodded slowly, then turned back toward the yard. She watched him go, a strange ache in her chest. Maybe that was her legacy. Not the kills, not the doctrine, but the reminder that humanity mattered, even when the world tried to erase it. Later that night, she wrote something in her journal. She didn't write often. Words had always felt heavier than steel, but she needed to leave something behind that was hers, not theirs. She wrote, "Strength isn't silence. It's what you carry inside the silence. Dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts." She closed the journal. For the first time in months, her breath felt steady. Not clean, not light, but steady. And maybe that was enough, because she knew the world would move on. There would be other missions, other operatives, other names whispered in halls she'd never walk again. But somewhere, in some dark corner of the world, another soldier would face failure. Another soldier's equipment would die in their hands. Another soldier would think they were alone, and because of her, they would know they weren't. They would rise, they would move, they would survive, not because of the suit, not because of the weapon, but because somewhere once Blade Viper had proven that even when everything fails, human will does not. She lay back in her bunk, the notes still on her desk, the journal closed beside it. Her eyes drifted shut, heavy with exhaustion, but lighter than they had been in a long time. And in the quiet, with no alarms, no voices, no orders, she finally let herself believe in a truth that wasn't clean, but was hers. Sometimes, dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.